49ers than it does to the Eagles. What do I
Yeah.
mean by that? San Francisco does not get the 1 seed. They are going to be eliminated from the 1 seed, in my eyes, if they don't win this game. There's not a chance the Eagles are going to drop because if San Francisco loses this game, they're going to go
They'd have
from
to go
8 and
down. The
3
Eagles
to
would have to lose
4.
twice.
Philadelphia is going to go from 10 and 1 to 11 and 1. There's a 3 game gap between them. Philly also needs to lose one extra game because they have the tiebreaker. They're going to have to lose 4 more games in the last 6 games or last 5 games. That's not going to happen.
No.
Now, the 49ers, like I said, if they win this one, they get to within 1 game with the Eagles. And they have the tiebreaker. So if Philly loses one more than the 49ers down the stretch, San Francisco is going to be the 1 seed in that regard. And one other thing, they have the tiebreaker against the other team that's kind of coming up there in Dallas. They beat
Yeah.
Dallas. They beat the daylights out of Dallas, so they're going to have the tiebreaker over them as well. Now, the reason I also think this game matters more to the 49ers is when you look at the Eagles' schedule. I've mentioned it a couple of times. They faced 3 straight playoff teams. This is a tough game and a tough sledding of games for the 49ers. For the Eagles. They faced Dallas, they faced Kansas City, and they also faced Buffalo in 3 consecutive weeks. There was something similar in all 3 games. They were down. They came back from behind and won in all 3 games. In against Dallas, they were down a touchdown, and against Kansas City and Buffalo, they were down 17-7, I believe, at one point in both of those games. They ended up
Yeah.
winning all. They ended up winning all 3. They're at 10-1. But in this game, I don't know if they're going to be able to come back from behind against the 49ers team with that same formula.
Can I
Additionally,
ask you,
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
when considering those other teams, do you think that the 49ers defense is the best defense out of those so far? I know Kansas City does have a really good defense, but yeah, I'm just asking your opinion while we're looking back at the competition that the Eagles have faced.
I think that that's a good point that you bring up, and I would probably go with the 49ers. The reason being, I think their defensive line is going to be the key because the way that you kind of make Jalen Hurts uncomfortable is you got to put pressure on the pocket. I think the 49ers, if you look at it overall, have a better defensive line than the Chiefs, and I think that that's going to be the way that they kind of have to win this one. I do like the 49ers defense a little better, although I do think Kansas City, while they might not look as great on paper, they're a very good defense and they're well coached. So I think that's a good question you asked because when you look at it, you're trying to find out the differences as to how the 49ers can win this game if the other teams weren't able to win despite being ahead. And so I think that's important. You talk about scheduling, right? Eagles, they're coming off 3 pretty brutal games. One
Yeah, they're
that
going to
went
be
to
much,
overtime
much
last
higher
year, and you're
because
facing a
they were
physical
playing.
49ers team. Yeah.
Because that's another thing too. Not only do they just have a couple of days rest advantage, the 49ers do, but also like their game was finished early. Like they were pretty much resting people,
Yeah.
able to not play them to the maximum, where the Eagles were in overtime playing their best guys, getting snaps out of them. And I think I saw the same thing. I mean, I was obviously not in overtime, but even in the Kansas City game, they were playing, you know what I mean, all the way to the very end. So they've exhausted themselves in every game. Um, and looking at that playoff seeding, they could still lose this game, tell themselves, hey, we beat them in the championship game. We'll probably face them again. We can beat them then. If they beat Dallas, then this game doesn't really matter. Because that's kind of my thought is if the Eagles beat us or beat the 49ers this game, then that Dallas game means nothing. Well, they can have that same mindset about this game. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying I think they're going to be up for it, but I'm just saying I agree with you that I don't think that the weight is the same for the Eagles because they have won before. They can kind of use those excuses and they can say, if we see them again in the playoffs, that we've been able to meet them there before. Now, I
Yeah.
think for pride wise, when we talk about the way that players are talking, I don't think that I don't think any team walks into a game like, oh, this game doesn't matter. But I just think maybe morale wise that it might be more important to the 49ers. And then also not morale wise, but like literally uh when we talk about winning the Super Bowl, I think whoever gets that number 1 seed is going to have a huge advantage. We're talking about injuries, we're talking about rest, Eric Armstead and his foot, the Eagles having Lane Johnson struggling with an injury, whatever NFC team gets that bye week is going to have a huge advantage.
I think that that's important as well. But the one other aspect that I'll mention when I talk about the difference in this matchup between who wants it or between San Francisco and Philadelphia, and you pointed it out, it's that bye week that's most important. Like I said above, the 49ers are 8-3, Philadelphia's 10-1. Philadelphia loses, they drop to 10-2. San Francisco goes to 9-3. There's still one game of a gap. To me, Philly, their most important game isn't San Francisco. Their most important game is the game right after San Francisco because they face the Dallas Cowboys in week 14. Now, the Dallas Cowboys and Eagles, that's a big matchup. Why? Because if Philly loses to San Francisco, they now are at risk of potentially losing the division to Dallas because if Dallas beats them in week 14, Dallas ends up getting the NFC East or they take control because they're currently at 9-3 after beating Seattle. And so there's a lot that goes on. I think for Philadelphia, though, most importantly, I think that game is the one that's more important to Philadelphia. So I'm not going to say that you look ahead and you don't focus on one game at a time. But I think when you look at how brutal the last three games have been, as well as the game after the 49ers, you can understand where there might be slips in the cracks with the 49ers, or sorry, with the Eagles when they face San Francisco.